Hey everyone, it's Justine and welcome to a new video. Today I'm counting down the most watched tutorials from the videos that I produced in 2019. This has been a year-round favorite as a bit of a recap in 2018 and 2017, and this is my third time doing it. I hope you enjoy the top tutorials, and I have full links to the full tutorials below in the video description. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and you can click the bell to get notifications whenever I produce a new video or when I go live. There's going to be lots of exciting things coming here in 2020 and you don't want to miss out. Thanks so much for all your support over the last few years, whether you're a new subscriber or have been with me for years. I really appreciate it, and let's get started. All right, so counting down the top 10 card making tutorials for 2019. Number 10 was 12 ways to add gold to your projects using a variety of different mediums and tools. So I covered things like simple tasks such as heat embossing. Then I went into perfect pearls and how to use them properly, and how to set them, for example. I used the glimmer foil machine for foiling. You could also use, of course, your laminator and do regular foiling. But how this machine works was described in this video as well, and it creates such a beautiful result using some gold-plated dies. The next up were a couple of different types of embellishments with gold. Nouveau drops are some of my favorite ways to fill up white space or something that needs a little extra something. Another one that I love for that are sequins and confetti, gold glitter pens to color sentiments, some glimmer paste or any type of gold paste for that matter with stencils. You could even use the embellishment mousse from Nouveau, which is a little bit thicker and gives a little bit more texture. You could use gold paper with your die cut, so this gorgeous satin or mirror cardstock that I absolutely love. And last, I also talked about wire and how to make wire sentiments using the happy jig, which is also a really fun way to do it. Then I went into some more mixed media techniques such as using sprays and washi tapes. So those were the 12 ways to use gold, and I have the full tutorial available below if you want to learn how to use any of these products or you want to use them in more detail. Number 9 was my first Christmas video of the year, so it hasn't been out on my channel for all that long, about a month, but yet it was number 9 in the most viewed. I looked at things like Copic coloring, adding white accents, and creating some beautiful cards using the new Concord and 9th release that was for Christmas. There were lots of things in this release though that weren't necessarily just for Christmas, so it's worth checking out even though the holidays are over, because there are a ton of different techniques in this video that I find useful. And I went ahead and explained some things like turnabout stamps, for example. If they're new to you, they're one of my favorite things to use. And this one in particular was a double turnabout. So how do you go about it when there's two turnabouts working together? How do you add small accents in collages like for this card here? Lastly, I went in through some highlighting, how to create backgrounds with stamps for my last card in this tutorial, and then also creating just, again, some really pretty Christmas cards using that new release. In place number 8 was how to use the foil quill with a Cricut. This was a new tool that was released in January. So essentially the idea of the tool is you choose any design space image or any image that you have as an SVG cut. You could use this with a Cricut, Brother Scan and Cut, or whatever die cutting machine you have, electronic. You put your cardstock on your mat, you add your foil and keep it in place with washi tape. There is now a tool here, a specific mat for it, so you don't have to bother with that washi tape anymore. Then you load the mat and you get going, and what this does is it applies heat to the foil using a specific tool, and then you're able to pull back the design and reveal a beautiful intricate image using foil. So another way to use your foils. I'm still waiting on that way to use it with stamping and get a good impression, but one day it'll come, I swear. The next most watched card making tutorial was not about card making in general, but the top 10 must-have card making supplies to have in your stash. This is a perfect one for beginners or people who just want a review of the things that are kind of necessities, at least for me. I went into a whole bunch of different tools like the Misty stamping tool, an embossing bag, sandpaper eraser for erasing those pesky fingerprints that you get full of ink, different types of quality adhesive. I always use liquid adhesive, so I showed that off most. Then the tonic glass mat as a media surface for easy cleanup was just a life changer. Purple tape, which I absolutely love for adhering die cuts or adhering something temporarily. I went into blending tools for the tools that were available at the time. We have embossing powders here, the different types you should invest in or things you can leave out, for example. A heat tool, which I've replaced now that I moved to Europe, and a die cutting machine, the Gemini Junior, which is an absolute life changer as far as being able to cut intricate dies. Pixie spray to adhere stencils, my distress sprayer or any sort of spraying water bottle to spray surfaces is perfect. I always personally love recaps of things like that I should have in my stash, or stamps that are people's favorites. It's always fun to watch to see what everyone else has in their craft room. A very popular video this year was fixing card making mistakes. So what happens when you use the wrong ink type, for example. I went into some brief reviews on ink properties, what to use on certain types of paper. Ink smudges, for example, getting your fingerprints on there as I showed earlier in the last video clip. What happens if you have crooked paper? So for example, you can use dental floss to get any sort of adhesive away from your card and separate it. What happens if you use excessive glue? So using an adhesive remover to grab that, or of course using a matte clear glue. Messy embossing, so ensuring that embossing bag is used and liberally when you do your embossing in order to ensure that no little flakes stay on your paper. Your MISTI stamping tool, of course, for stamping mistakes. This is an absolute game changer for stampers. I can't tell you enough how much I love that tool. So all those common card making mistakes are listed in that video, and it's a fun one to watch. It's very relatable to the difficulties we all have in our craft room. Now, I read this book quite a few years ago, and then the Netflix series came out, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up with Marie Kondo, and I decided to go through all my crafting supplies and clean out my room because I knew I was prepping to move overseas at this point in time. So I went through my process, my vlog, so to say, about how I purged and cleaned up my craft room. I went through some very basic tips from the book itself about gratitude and letting go of supplies and things like that. And as soon as my craft stuff comes in from overseas, I'm going to do a recap this year on how I've followed up with Marie Kondo. Does the organization solution work? Did I stick to it? The next video was all on shaker card hacks. So how to create shaker cards easily and quickly and effectively, and a few different hacks I use with that. So I talked about, for example, pre-made plastic pouches rather than using the acetate sheets. These are from My Favorite Things, but a few different companies have come out with them now. Using foam sheets, for example, to cut your frame instead of using foam tape. This saves you a lot of time, especially when you have something intricate like the die that I have here. We went into lots of different detail on how to create shaker cards, tips on best practices, how to get multiple colors in different window frames. So this card, for example, using this hands die from Ellen Hutson, I kind of wanted to create all the colors of the world, so to say, as a little bit of a symbolic card, how I got all those colors in there. Lots of really fun tips and tricks on how to do that. Also getting the most out of your dies and using die cuts you wouldn't think of to create windows. This is one of my favorite cards I've created all time. I recap it pretty much every year because it's my favorite. But creating windows, for example, out of simple solid shapes like these butterflies and adding the die cut on top. Embossing on windows, so using heat safe and heat resistant acetate. Very important that it's heat resistant so you don't melt your plastic. And how that can create just a world of difference on your shaker cards and help you with sentiment placement. So a really, really great card tutorial. Getting into the most popular cards of the year, the 10 ways to save time on card making. I went through my tips and tricks. I really recommend watching the full tutorial because I give a lot of tips in between that I'm not going to give in this video. But for example, starting out with simple things like pre-cutting your card bases, using large word dies so you don't have to worry about filling up the space, using simple score lines to create some beautiful interest but also very subtle. Then going into background stamps and how they can help you, because they again fill up a lot of space, so you don't really need to worry about anything except for maybe adding a die cut or a sentiment on top when it's all finished. Really create quick cards in just minutes. Standalone stamps. So what types of stamps you could be looking for when you're purchasing in order to get these types of cards. So this one from Gina K, for example, really just with a simple stamp filled up the card, and you can make it as intricate as you want with coloring or just leave it black and white. Those are pretty too. Some creative layering and clusters I went into. I also shared a technique on how to get the most out of your layering stamps, because who wants to stamp this just once when you can stamp it 4 times super easily, get quadruple the amount of flowers, and you don't have to sit there and line them up 4 different times. All you need to do is shift your paper. So that was a really cool technique. Also using shimmer powders instead of creating watercolor backgrounds, just pour on some powder, add some water and spray, and you have an entire background that is absolutely stunning when it's finished. This one was one of my favorite backgrounds I had ever created. I thought it looked so beautiful when it was all said and done. And it really turned out to be quite a hit of a card, and all I had to do was pour that powder, spritz with water, and add a die cut. Watercolor washes, so embossing a background stamp or buying pre-embossed cardstock like this one from Concord and 9th, and adding some watercolor over top makes a quick background and easy to do. The next thing was adhere and emboss. So grabbing a larger piece of double-sided adhesive, this is 2-inch from scrapbook.com, and using an interesting embossing powder. So Wow embossing powder has a lot of mixes, so meaning that there's different types of powder in each jar, and these are really, really thick powder. They're not the ultra fine, they're not the super fine, they're not even regular, they're thick, and they create some really beautiful images. So again, 10 ways to create cards in minutes. Go watch that full tutorial. It's awesome. 5 techniques we often forget about. I did a collaboration with Ingrid, so there's actually 10 of these in total that you can watch. And I went into techniques such as layering and double stenciling. So layering one stencil on top of the other to create interest inside of a stencil, if that makes sense. Makes for some beautiful backgrounds. Acetate smush is one of my favorite ways to watercolor because I can't watercolor. Just adding a bit of ink on some acetate, spray it with water, and then stick it onto your watercolor paper and see how beautiful you get of a little splash on your paper. And this creates simple cards in just a couple minutes and makes it look like you spent a lot of time watercoloring and creating this beautiful wash when all you really did was stick some plastic. Joseph's coat is another technique that I like. Create a blended background. Then either with a background stamp or a variety of stamps, whichever one is your preference, you're going to heat emboss these using clear ink, or clear embossing powder rather. So you're going to add your embossing powder when your ink is dry, of course. Heat it all up. And now that area is protected. So you're going to go with a blending tool with some black ink or a dark color and go over top, and it creates this absolutely gorgeous background. I love the way that it turned out and looked. A simple technique that's easy for beginners but we forget about often is watercolor stamping. So once again, using those same stamps, I'm inking them up with some variety of inks, adding some water on top and stamping onto watercolor paper. This makes it look like I watercolored the images rather than stamped them, and it makes me look like a watercoloring genius. But really, it's super easy to do. So when I lift this up, you're going to see that it looks watercolored. Really, really fun technique, something I learned back in my basic days of card making, and I absolutely love it. I showed this technique very briefly on the other video, but scoring accents, so creating backgrounds and subtle lines, is a very elegant way to add accents. So 5 techniques we forget about, go check them out and then check out Ingrid's video for another 5. The most popular video, and my actually most popular video of all time as of now, is I went into some great techniques like DIY embossing powder, why you actually only need one type of embossing powder, so clear embossing. So regardless of what color ink you use, if you stamp it down, stamp over top with Versamark ink, and then cover with clear embossing powder, you'll get an embossed look, and then you always get to just use the color of your inks rather than having to invest in a whole bunch of different types of embossing powder. This is a really great hack for people who want to save money on embossing powders. Another hack is buying just white or clear sequins. You can color sequins with alcohol-based markers. So you can create whichever color sequins you want, and then you have the markers to use other techniques. So a great money-saving technique. Dream drops or any type of thing, put them onto black cardstock and see what happens. You'll see that I just sprayed or put down some blue and some gold, and they turn absolutely a different color when you're on black cardstock. So another fun little hack there for you. Give your mediums a try on other colors of cardstock. You'll be surprised at the results and what you can get. The layered stamp Misty hack, which I realized I spelled wrong on that graphic. This one I showed already in the video. The idea of getting multiple layered stamps and just layering them once, and then you can just swap your cardstock and change it 90 degrees each time, and you get the stamped image quickly and easily, and multiple ones. The other one was embossing on vellum. This is something a lot of people don't know as well, how to emboss on vellum. So how that you actually can emboss on vellum. A lot of people think that it will melt, but it does warp slightly, but you can be careful. I have lots of hacks with how to hold your heat tool and things like that. So thank you so much, everyone, for your support in 2019. I really appreciate it. I have lots of things coming for 2020, lots of improvements to my channel, and I'm hoping to show my face a little bit more often on screen. So I hope you enjoyed those tutorials from last year. I also have the top 10 tutorials of 2018 and 2017 on my channel. All of them are wonderful videos, so be sure to check them out. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back soon for another video. Bye for now.